Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Michael. That was great. Thank you. I have some good news for you. More people are going to make more money in the next few years than have been made in all the history of the American economy. We are living at the very best time in all of human history, in the very best country in all of human history, with the fastest growing economy in human history. We have a $12 billion economy. It's growing about $500 billion a year, and every penny of that is going through the hands of the salespeople, and my job is to help you close your fingers so that some of it sticks. Your job is to learn what you need to learn to take advantage of it. Most people have great goals. I want to increase my income and lose weight and get out of debt and be thin and happy and healthy and have a wonderful family. But then they decide, but before I start, I'm going to take a vacation to a beautiful place called Someday Isle. And in my estimation, 80% of the population lives on Someday Isle. Someday I'll lose some weight, and someday I'll read that book and listen to that program and join the Yes Network, and someday I'll get out of debt, someday I'll increase my income, but it's always Someday Isle. If you want to be a great success, there's one simple rule, is vote yourself off the island for life. If you decide you're going to do something, do it. You know, they've done dozens and dozens of studies over the years. They find that there's one major difference between successful people and unsuccessful people. Successful people launch. They start. They get on with it. They just do it. Unsuccessful people get the same ideas and the same information, but they've always got an excuse for not starting. Now, 95% of what you do or don't do in life is controlled and determined by your habits. And so successful people have good habits, and unsuccessful people have bad habits. If you do something repeatedly over and over again, you develop a habit. Well, what we find is that you can develop a habit with regard to taking action. Successful people, they hear a good idea, they take action quickly. Pretty soon they develop the habit of hearing a good idea, taking action. Hearing a good idea, taking action. Almost like a Pavlovian response. That's a good idea, and they try it out. Now here's an important point. Nothing works the first time. When you try something new, it probably won't work. When you try something new several times, it probably won't work. And the turning point in my life came when I would hear good ideas, and I was so eager to be successful in selling. I would run out and try the ideas, and they wouldn't work. I'd try a way of getting an appointment or answering an objection or closing a sale. It wouldn't work. And my natural response, and I think just to be disappointed. And then I realized nothing works, at least the first few times. So I decided I would try a new idea 5 or 10 times before I passed judgment on it. I would not just try it once and quit like most people do, and that changed my whole life. It was a turning point in my life because I realized from then on, if you've got a good idea and you've got a good goal and you want to double your income and improve the quality of your life and you have to try new things in order to get new results, it's not going to work the first time. So you say, well, that didn't work. Try something else and try something else and try something else. Now, if you try, only 2 things can happen. What are they? Succeed or fail. If you succeed, you do more of it. If you fail, you learn from it, get smarter, and try it again. So you cannot lose by taking action. You can only lose by not taking action. I think the great majority of people, surrounded by the greatest opportunities in the best country in the history of man on earth, who don't succeed are people who are on the island. You've always got a reason for not taking action. And if you delay taking action repeatedly over and over again, you develop the habit of never taking action. You develop the habit of procrastinating and holding back and so on. Now, I hired a consultant one day to come into my company. He charged me several $1,000s. He left me with a crummy T-shirt and this graph. And this graph actually explains success and failure in life, and it really is the basis for what we're going to talk about today. And the graph is pretty simple, and it really opened my eyes. So this is the graph of financial success and failure in life. And what you start off with is everybody starts off at 0, and this is the graph of income. So some people make 10,000, some people make 20 and 30 and 50 and 70, 80, 90, 100, 250, and so on. Here's the first thing that I learned, is where you are on the income graph is where you have decided to be. Each person has decided to earn what they are earning today as a result of the things that they have done or the things that they have failed to do. Sometimes it's the things that you have failed to do that are costing you the most today. You failed to take the course, listen to the program, read the book, try the new methods, attend the seminar, and so on. And people say, well, I didn't do anything. Yes, that's your problem, sir. You didn't do anything. That's why you're sitting there. So we are where we are and what we are because we have decided to be there. Now, this was a big shocker to me because all my young life, I thought all my problems were determined by other people. It was my parents and my bosses and the economy and the market and the competition and the prices and everything else. It was only when I realized it was me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer that I was able to take charge of my life. And I'll talk about this in a minute. Now, this is the graph of time. These are the years of your life. and this is the amount that you end up at the end of your life. This is becoming a major issue in America. 77 million baby boomers are approaching retirement right now, and about 40, 50, 60% of them do not have a pot to you-know-what in or a window to throw it out of. The great majority of Americans, the average American approaching retirement age, has a net worth of $31,000, plus their pensions, which is why the pension issue is such a major issue today, because people have nothing else. Well, this is the way life works. You start off earning something at your first job. They pay you whatever they can. And then your financial life, for most people, their financial life is like a bad month on the NASDAQ. It's up and it's down, and it's up and down. And they make a little money, and they're out of the money, they're in the money, they're out of the money, they're broke, they're making a lot, they're making a little, they're making a lot, they're making a little. It's like this. Sometimes they're the windshield, sometimes they're the bug. All right? And here's where they end up with, as a result of experience plus luck. This is where most people end up with in life. And the average for about 80% of the population is a 3% increase over the course of their lifetimes. And by the way, I have some good news for you. Everybody here is in the top 10% in America today. And the reason is because you're here. Because only the top 10% of professionals ever come to a seminar like this. The other 80 or 90% of people in our field always have a reason not to go. They always have a reason not to read the books. They don't have the time. They know all that stuff already. Sometimes people say to me, oh, I know all that stuff already. I say, well, geez, you must be awfully rich. Wow. And of course, they look away because they got holes in their shoes and they took a bus to work. The fact is that the most successful people of all are the ones that come to these courses. Statistically speaking, it's always the top 10% who come to these courses and are eager to learn more because they recognize that the only way that you can earn more is to learn more. So they're always reaching out for new information. There's never a guarantee that you'll learn something, but there's one guarantee that if you don't come, you won't learn anything. So you're in the top 10%. But imagine you're driving across the farm roads with no road signs and no road maps. In other words, there's no way to tell where you are. Well, even if you're driving a brand new Mercedes-Benz, engineered beautifully in every respect, wonderfully made, if you're driving a brand new car but you're lost on the back roads with no road signs and no road maps, you'll never make any progress. My point is that your mind is like a Mercedes-Benz. You are smart, you're intelligent, you have potential beyond limit. They say you could not use all of your potential if you had 100 lifetimes. They say, you've heard it said, people use about 10% of their potential. I've studied this for almost a quarter of a century. The average person uses about 2% of their potential. They're saving the rest up for some good reason. But we're getting by. What we're accomplishing in life today is with about 2% of our mental potential. When Einstein died, his brain was put into a jar of formaldehyde at Princeton University, where it was discovered some years later, and it has been then parceled out and sent out to scientists to analyze. They say that Einstein, considered the greatest genius of the 20th century, never used more than 15% of his mental potential in his entire life. And you and I use considerably less. So, the point that I was making is that the potential that you have is inevitably, when I say to double your income, people say, I'd like to double my income, but I doubt it. I doubt it. Are you kidding? You could probably earn 3, 4, 5, 10 times as much as you're earning today. And by the way, anybody who's earning 10 times as much as you're earning today was at one time earning what you're earning today. Okay? And then they did something differently which enabled them to increase their income. So, let's say you're on this back road and you're driving along and you say to your navigator, boy, you know, this is lousy. There's always too much month at the end of the money. We worry about money all the time. If the tires, we blow a tire, it's a major disaster in our family. We make minimum payments on our credit cards. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Come on. Don't look at me so sanctimonious. You know what I'm talking about. We've all been there. I've been there. And you say, well, what can we do? We say, well, honey, every so often through the trees, I see a freeway. I see nice cars are whipping along that freeway. If we could just get off these back roads and onto that freeway over there, we could really make a lot of progress. Well, the freeway is people who are whipping along in life, making great livings, having great lives, beautiful homes, houses, cars, and so on. And they're whipping along. Well, how do you get onto the freeway? Well, you find a way across country, and that's what we're going to do today. Find a way to get onto the freeway. And once you get onto the freeway, you can put your pedal to the metal, and you can really whip along. And this is where you get with knowledge plus skill. With knowledge plus skill. Now, here's an important point. A person driving a rusted-out jalopy that's belching smoke with the wheels falling off on the freeway is going to make greater progress than a person driving a brand-new Mercedes-Benz on the back roads. My point is that people on the freeway are not necessarily smarter or better than you are. In fact, the rule is that no one is smarter or better than you. You have as much talent and ability and intelligence as you could possibly use an entire lifetime, but they're on the freeway and you're on the back roads. Once you get on the freeway, you can start to move. And on the freeway, notice this, is that every single space of every single period of your life, you'll be making more money, and at the end of your life, you'll be worth vastly more. People on the freeway are earning 10%, increasing their income 10%, 20%, 30% a year. I had a gentleman who came to my course a couple of weeks ago, and he said he attended my seminar 6 months ago and was coming again. It was 170 miles away. And I said, well, that's an awful lot of sacrifice. He said, I learned one idea about closing in your seminar, and I've made $40,000 more in the last 6 months. He said, I came here to see if there's something I missed. He said one idea increased his personal income $40,000. It took his closing rate from 2 out of 10 to 9 out of 10 consistently and broke every record in his company. He said, I'm back. He said, I had never been to a seminar before. In fact, I was really uneasy about spending the money to go to a seminar. He said, but you've saved me years of hard work in getting to the same level. Here's the most wonderful thing, is once you're on the freeway, once you have learned the key success techniques that we'll talk about, you can use them over and over again. And when you use them over and over again, what happens? You get better at it. And then if you get better at it, then how much time does it take next time to get the same result? Less time. And that's the reason why some people are successful. They learn the critical success techniques, they use them over and over, they get better and better. It takes them less and less time to make more and more sales. That's it. You may not be able to dump basketballs like Michael Jordan, but you can learn any sales or business skill, because all sales skills are learnable. All business skills are learnable. And everybody who is good at a particular business or sales skill at one time did not know how to do it at all, and was poor at it when they first started. And what they did is they worked at it until they mastered it. Now, the reason I tell you this is because there's an enormous number of people who think, well, I'm not really good at prospecting, I'm not really good on the phone, I'm not really good at closing. No, these are skills. They're learnable skills. And please understand that, because many people hold themselves back for years because they think that they have a genetic defect about prospecting. You know, I wasn't born with the prospecting chromosome or something like that. No, you can learn any business skill. All you have to do is decide what it is, learn how to do it, practice over and over again until you master it. Are you with me so far? Yeah. Please understand this. Sometimes, and here's the rule, you're probably only one skill away from doubling your income right now. You're probably only one skill away from doubling your income right now. And you know what that skill is. Everybody knows what the skill is. They know if I was really good at prospecting, I could double my income. If I was really good at closing, I could double my income. If I was really good at overcoming the key objections I could double my income. In other words, we all know what it is in our heart of hearts, and your job is to figure out what it is and set it as a goal and make a plan and work on it until you've mastered that skill. Well, let us begin. Some years ago, when I began studying success, I came across the principle, which you've all seen and which I talk about at great length, is that you become what you think about most of the time. You become what you think about most of the time. Going back 3,000 years, there's a law of correspondence which says that your outer world corresponds to your inner world. Your outer world is a mirror of what's going on inside. So therefore, if you want to find out who a person really is, find out what they think about most of the time. Now, at the University of Pennsylvania and in other studies which are done every single year, I read studies where they've interviewed tens of thousands and eventually hundreds of thousands of salespeople, and then they sliced and diced them by percentiles to identify the top salespeople in those groups and what they think about most of the time. How do they think? How do they approach their work? What is their attitude toward their work? When they get up in the morning and they think about their work, how do they think inside? Now, here's an important point. Just like all sales skills are learnable, all thinking skills are learnable as well. And how do you learn a sales skill? You learn it by practicing. How do you learn a mental skill? You learn it by practicing. And so you can develop any mental skill. People say, well, if I was more confident, I would make more calls, which would lead to more presentations and more sales. Well, good. Self-confidence is learned. It's a learned skill. Is it easy? No. Is anything in life easy? No. But it is eminently achievable. As Les Brown will talk about, he'll say it's possible. Everything is possible. But it's up to you and I. So what we found is that there's an 80-20 rule that applies. And the 80-20 rule that applies says that 80% of your success is mental. 80% of your success is determined by how you sell. And what we found over and over again is that a person who has the right mental attitude can move from one side of the country to the other, change industries, change companies, and start at the bottom, and within 90 days they'll be one of the top people in that company. If you have the right mental attitude, they have found that it overwhelms all training. If you take two groups of people, which they have done, and two groups of people with identical skills, but one has a really positive attitude toward themselves and what they're doing, and the other people have average attitudes, you would take the people with average attitudes and train them thoroughly for 6 weeks. Take the people with great attitudes, don't train them at all. Put them into the field. Within 90 days, the people with the right attitudes will be running circles around the best trained people, because of some of the things we'll talk about in our first session. So what I find is that if you look in your workbook, we talk about the 7 characteristics of top salespeople. This is how the top salespeople think. This is the way they think, and they think about it every day. Just like you brush your teeth, you take a shower, you get dressed, you exercise. They just practice this every day until it becomes as automatic as breathing in and breathing out. Number one quality, top quality, is that top salespeople are ambitious. They want to be successful. They see selling as a way of achieving their goals. They're ambitious, they're driven, they're determined, they want things. They're hungry. And the very best word I've ever found in studying successful people is hungry. They're hungry, they want it. There's nothing worse than a person trying to succeed in a field surrounded by hungry people and they're not hungry. If you're really ambitious, and they see themselves capable of being the best. They see themselves capable of being the best. And this is your goal. And I tell you, when I was a young person, I had this whole idea of being the best was an overwhelming thought to me. Because what I learned is that if you're going to be successful, you have to be in the top 10%. Now, fortunately, everyone here is either in the top 10% or you intend to be. Is that correct? Yes. Say yes. Yes. All right. So, if you're not there yet, you intend to be. Remember, future intent determines present action. If you've decided to be in the top 10%, then the only question you ask is how? How do I get there? What I have found is that making a decision to be in the top 10% is the turning point in your life. And when I heard this, and by the way, remember the old question, why did Willie Sutton rob banks? That's where the money is. That's where the money is. Well, why do you want to be in the top 10%? That's where the money is, all right? And if somebody has to be in the top 10%, somebody has to be in the bottom 10%. And you can choose. If you have a choice, you can choose to be in the top 10% or the medium 10% or the bottom 10%. So if you have a choose, you might as well choose to be in the top 10%, right? Say yes. All right. So then the only question is how. Now, when I was a young man, what I learned when I heard this, I was really kind of overwhelmed by it because I had low self-esteem, I had low self-confidence, I had bombed out of school, I hadn't graduated, I worked at laboring jobs for years, and they told me, you know, if you really want to be successful, you have to be in the top 10 or 20%. And I thought, oh, I could never do that. I'd never been in the top 10 or 20% in my life. I was started off so far behind, I thought I was first. And then I learned something that changed my life. I learned that everybody who's in the top 10% started in the bottom 10%. Everybody who was doing well was once doing poorly. Everybody who was at the top of your field, our field, was at one time not even in our field and didn't even know that it existed. And nobody's smarter than you, and nobody's better than you. They got into the field, they say, how do you succeed in this field? They asked other people, they read the books, they came to the courses, they practiced it over and over again, they got onto the high road, and they went to the top of their field. Then what you do is you make a decision to be in the top 10%, then the only question you ask is how. So, ambition is the starting point. Is you find that ambition is a great quality. Ambition is the driving engine of all success. Be ambitious for your kids, ambitious for your family, ambitious for your health, ambitious for your career, which just means that you want to make it better and better and better, and you're willing to work for it. So the second quality of top salespeople is that they're courageous. They're courageous because we know that the number one obstacle to success is fear. Number one obstacle to success is fear. Fear triggers low self-confidence. Fear causes us to hold back. Fear causes us to sell ourselves short. Fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of criticism, fear of embarrassment. Fear is and always has been our biggest enemy. And what top salespeople have learned is the only way that you can succeed is to confront the fear. Do the thing you fear. The only way that you can overcome a fear is by doing the thing that you're afraid of. Now, what is the biggest fear that we have in selling? The biggest fear we have in selling is fear of rejection, fear of criticism, fear of call reluctance. If you had absolutely no fear of calling on people, you'd be a selling machine. And the more people you call on, the more people you would talk to, the more people you talk to, the better you get, the better you've got, the more sales you'd make, the more eager you'd be, the more motivated you'd be to talk to even more people, you get onto an upward spiral. But it's fear of rejection. So when I was a young man, I learned two things. The first thing I learned is the only way to deal with the fears is to do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. Confront the fear. What I learned, it was a very important insight, is that you do the thing and the courage comes afterwards. You do the thing and the courage comes afterwards. I used to sit and wait and wait and wait. When I have enough confidence, when I feel really good, when I've studied my materials long enough, when I have really got myself revved up, then I'll go out and make calls. But that's not the way it works. What you do is you get a minimum amount of information and make your first call. You, just like a dog going after a passing car, you just throw yourself at the market. And here's the second thing. Here's the second thing that I learned, and it's this, is that rejection is not personal. And it was a turning point for me. Rejection is not personal. What is your name, sir?
Fred.
Fred. Fred, have we ever met before?
No.
If I reject you, it's not personal because I don't even know you. So if I reject you, it's just a commercial response. Human beings, people in our society are confronted with 2,000 to 4,000 commercial approaches. Sales, radio, television, salespeople, billboards. 2,000 to 4,000 commercial messages a day. In order to survive, you've got to be like a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. You've got to be jumping and moving all the time. So when someone calls you up, their first reaction is not interested, don't want it, don't need it, can't use it, can't afford it, not in the market right now, and I'm happy with my existing supplier. Have you heard this before? Yes, this is just a knee-jerk reaction. It's a knee-jerk reaction. Of course, it can't possibly be true, or we wouldn't be selling $12 trillion worth of stuff per year. Because if we have a $12 trillion economy, that means that $12 trillion worth of stuff is being sold. Right, so therefore, people are buying with both hands and by the trillions of dollars worth, so obviously they buy. But the natural reaction to any sales approach is rejection. And your job is to realize it's just not personal. You just let it go off your back like water off a duck's back. You just always be polite. Well, say thank you very much. Appreciate it. Go on to the next person. You know what do they say? Some will, some won't. So what? Next. And it's just as simple as that. And once you reach the point where you have nerves of steel when it comes to prospecting, your business will double and triple because you'll have no fear of calling 10, 20 people a day. You'll have no fear of knocking on doors and calling on people and even cold calling. Now, the third quality, the third way of thinking of top salespeople is that they're committed. They're committed. You can never imagine an uncommitted person. They believe in their companies, they believe in their products and services, and they believe in themselves. They believe it. And what they say is, I love my work. I love my work. I love my work. Ooh. Say it. Say, I love my work.
I love my work.
Now, going back, and I jumped ahead, but going back, with regard to overcoming any fear, psychologists have found that the manifestation of fear are the words or the feeling, I can't, I can't, I can't, which paralyzes action. But you can cancel that out like throwing a switch by saying, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. So whenever you think of prospecting, you think of picking up the phone, and you think of knocking on the door, when you think of calling on someone, and that fear wells up inside of you, you can just push it all the way back down by saying, I can do it, 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 I can do it. I love my work. I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best. I love my work. I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. Talk to yourself like this, because we found that 95% of your emotions are determined by how you talk to yourself throughout the day. It's called your inner dialogue. It's that stream of consciousness going on. How you talk to yourself determines how you feel. So therefore, talk to yourself the way you want to feel. People say, well, yeah, but what if you don't love your work and you're not the best and you don't think you can do it? Isn't that lying to yourself? No, it's telling the truth. It's telling the truth in advance. You talk to yourself the way you want to be. I like myself. I can do it. I'm the best, and so on. So, always say, I love my work, and we know that caring is the critical factor. What do we say in selling? They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. There is no more effective salesperson than a person who really believes in what they're selling and really cares about their customers. And customers can pick it up like chemistry, and we want to buy from these people and buy from them again and recommend them to our friends. Until today, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the warmth, the chemistry between yourself and the salesperson, or between the salesperson and yourself, is the critical factor in why people buy. And the reason they buy, University of Chicago study, is the level of conviction that you have about how good your product is. People pick that up through the skin and are influenced by your level of conviction. Have you ever heard a customer say, well, you know, what would you do in my situation? Or what, if I was your mother or brother or sister or father, would you recommend this to me? Or which one would you choose for yourself? What they're testing is your level of conviction. How much do you believe in it? How much do you believe that this is a good product? And when you say, this is my favorite, this is the one I sold to my mother, this is the one I used myself, the sale is almost made. It is amazing how easily influenced we are to buy when somebody says, this is the one I use myself. Oh, if I like you and it's the one you use yourself, well, then that's it. That answers my question. Number 4 quality is that they're professional. Is they're professional. They see themselves more as consultants than as salespeople. Now, this is something I learned when I was selling, moving from cold calling into appointments. Wow, real appointments, things like that. But I learned that there is a major difference, and they've interviewed tens of thousands of customers of the top 10% of salespeople in something like 32 industries, and they've asked them, when you think of this salesperson, yourself, what words come to mind? How would you describe them? And the words that are most commonly used to describe the top salespeople is, I view him or her as a friend, I view him or her as a consultant. I view him or her more as an advisor than a salesperson. I don't really see them just trying to sell me something. They really just try to help me make a good buying decision in this area. I rely on them for good advice. So your job is to position yourself in the customer's mind as a consultant. And when you think of the word consultant, what are the words that come to your mind? You say he or she is a consultant. What words come to your mind when you hear that he's a consultant? An advisor? An expert is usually the first word. Unbiased, yes, unbiased, objective, good listener, counselor, guide. In other words, a consultant is seen very differently. If you say, what do you think about when you hear the word salesperson? Okay, well, pushy, aggressive, trying to sell something, make money, and so on. Your job is to position yourself in the customer's mind as a consultant. Now, how do you position yourself as a consultant in your field? And whatever you're selling, you're a consultant because you're giving advice to help the person make a good buying decision. Is that true? Say yes. Yes. Okay, so you're a consultant. So I've had, by the way, I've worked with many companies who went home after this seminar, collected all their salespeople's business cards and threw them away and reprinted them as consultant. Sales consultant, not sales advisor or sales person, but just consultant or advisor. And their sales went up. The salespeople treated themselves differently. Hey, I'm a consultant now. I also think consultants are highly paid, too, right? What do they call an unemployed professional? A consultant, right? Anyway, So here's what we found. Here's how you position yourself as a consultant. Are you ready? The next time you're with a customer, you say, Mr. Prospect, and I learned this, Mr. Prospect, I'm not really here to sell you anything today. Please relax. I see myself more as a consultant than as a salesperson. And what I want to do is I want to ask you some questions and see if we can't help you achieve your goals in a cost-effective way. But I'm not really here to sell you anything. I see myself more as a consultant. And I learned this many years ago. The hardest thing of becoming a consultant, the hardest is for you to call yourself a consultant the first time. And I learned, I said, how did you become a consultant? He said, I just took a deep breath and said I was one. And here's what we find, is people accept you at your own evaluation of yourself. If you say, I'm an honest person, people say, okay, you're an honest person. They're not going to say, yeah, show me your credentials. Where's your Boy Scout badges? I mean, they don't ask you that. If you evaluate yourself to a person, I'm very punctual. They say, okay. Who's going to say, yeah, where's your time card? No, we evaluate people based on their evaluation of themselves. And then if a person says, I'm a consultant, we then sit back and we just watch to see how they behave. And if they behave like a consultant by asking us questions and listening closely to our answers and giving us advice or guidance and so on, we say, oh, this person is genuinely a consultant because they're acting like a consultant. So people accept you at your evaluation of yourself. So from now on, tell people you're a consultant and then behave like a consultant and seek to give them good advice, to be a helper rather than to sell them something. Just relax, and we'll talk about how to do this in the next session. It's really important. This is what changed my life. When I went from salesperson to consultant, my income just went off the board. I never went back. It was so amazing. So number 5, quality is that they're prepared. They're prepared. They carefully review every detail before every sales call. We say that preparation is the mark of the professional. And I could talk a lot about this, but the top 10% of salespeople are the best prepared. So I have to ask you a question, though. What is the most important single word in selling that determines the level of sales, your success, how many you sell, how often you resell, the referrals you get, your level of income? What is the most important single word? Yes. Well, the most important single word is credibility. It's credibility. Your credibility is everything. You know, Shakespeare once said, he who steals my purse steals trash, but who steals my good name steals all. So your credibility, or your level of trust, your level of believability in the heart and mind of the prospect is the critical factor that determines whether they deal with you. Is, do they trust you? Do they feel comfortable with you? In America, American buyers have 2 major fears, as you do. Fear number 1, common, is the fear of being taken advantage of. Because why? Why do customers have this fear? Because they have been taken advantage of in the past and they're gun shy. All right? The second fear that people have is the fear of being hustled. or being manipulated, being pushed into something. And so whenever they meet a salesperson, even though they've never met you before, their instant fears are triggered. Well, there's somebody who's going to take advantage of me and hustle me and take advantage of me in whatever order. And I say it's almost like a teeter-totter, is that when you meet the customer for the first time, their fear is high, your credibility is low or no. But as you spend time with them, the balance changes, and as your credibility goes up, their fear goes down. When their fear goes down to a certain point, they buy, and there's no problem with buying. And how do you build credibility with customers? Many different ways. We'll talk about them in a second, but one of the very best ways is to be prepared. If you do some homework on your customers and find out a little bit about them before you see them, then you come in prepared, you're more credible, you're more believable. A person can relax, you're a professional. Every single person who's ever had anything written about them any time in their lifetime is on Google or Yahoo. And you can pull it up. If you're calling on a customer, it's absolutely essential that you Google them and download their website and take a look at it. So you walk in and you say, Mr. Prospect, I thank you very much for your time. I had no idea that you have 12 branches and 223 people, and you've been in business for 17 years, and you've had an average growth rate of 12.5% over the last 5 years. That's quite amazing. How do you know that? Well, check your website. All companies have websites, and people within the companies. I go and I'm calling on a company or I'm speaking for a company, I'll pull down the background information, all their key people. It's all on the website. When I meet these people, I say, oh, geez, it's nice to meet you. You know, you went to the University of Wisconsin, and you were there for 4 years before you transferred to Chicago. And how do you know that stuff? It's on your website. I read it. But your credibility goes straight through the ceiling, and their fear of dealing with you disappears. It's almost like a vanishing act, because you've done your homework. So preparation is the mark of the professional. Now this is really important. Peter Drucker, who just died last week, he said leaders are learners. They're constantly learning. And there's 3 ways that you can upgrade your skills. These 3 ways will make you rich. Number 1 is to read on a regular basis. If you read 1 book per week in your sales, if you read 30 to 60 minutes in selling each week, 30 to 60 minutes will translate into 1 book a week. 1 book a week will translate into 50 books a year. To get a PhD from the University of Chicago or the University of Michigan, to get a PhD, you have to read 30 to 50 books and synthesize them into a dissertation, and it takes 8 or 9 years. You can get a PhD in selling every year by, instead of reading the newspaper from cover to cover, just spend half an hour reading in a sales book every day. Read a little bit in the morning before you start off and think about how you can use it. Read a little bit at lunchtime. Read a little bit in the evening rather than watching television. You read 30 to 60 minutes a day. It's a book a week. A book a week will give you the equivalent of a PhD in selling every year. I've never given this advice to anybody who has had the discipline to follow it, who has not tripled at least their income in the following 12 months. Their income has gone like this and gone hockey sticked when they just start reading, because you start reading, you see all kinds of different ideas and ways that you can serve your customers better. The stuff that you will learn from reading it is phenomenal, if you have the discipline to do it. The second thing is listen to audio programs in your car, preferably Bryan Tracy audio programs. The average sales professional in America drives 500 to 1,000 hours. 500 to 1,000 hours behind the wheel of your car. So I say don't listen to them sitting there. Listen to them when you drive, because your physical mind is taken up by the driving, so your mental mind is free to learn. And you can stop, start, move them forward and backward and so on. So that is the equivalent of 3 to 6 months of 40-hour weeks. That's the equivalent of 1 to 2 full-time university semesters. The University of Southern California said that you can get the equivalent of full-time university attendance just listening to audio programs as you drive from appointment to appointment. If you use and turn driving time into learning time, turn your car into what is called a mobile classroom, a classroom on wheels, and just continually learn. A good audio program contains the distilled essence of 30 to 50 books, and it usually is suffused with hundreds of hours of, maybe thousands of hours of personal experience. All right, number 7, and this is the most important of all, is they see themselves as the presidents of their own personal service corporations. They see themselves as the presidents of their own personal services corporations. Now, here is a great question. How many people here are self-employed? Well, what's the true answer? You can't see behind you. What percentage of these people are self-employed? Yes, 100%. Everybody is self-employed. Everybody is the president of their own personal services corporation from the time you take your first job until the time you retire. You're all the presidents of your own lives. The point that I'm making is that when you begin to see yourself as the president of your own company, you become a different person. You carry yourself differently. You dress differently. You see yourself as a more important person. You like yourself and respect yourself more, and it emanates from you like a light that affects your relationships with your customers. You're more gracious, you're more effective, you have more personal power. Are you with me so far? Yes. And the critical thing is to say these words, I am responsible. This means no more excuses, no more blaming, no criticizing, no complaining. You're responsible. You are not a victim. Lack of responsibility is the major reason for failure in adult life. It's failure not only at a personal level, social level, economic level. The acceptance of responsibility is the mark of the superior person. Now this brings us to the next part of selling. And I'm going to talk about 3 critical parts of selling today. The most important part, and probably the 2 areas where we need the most help. The first has to do with this one-to-one relationship. Remember, we said before, there's a direct relationship between how well you get along with other people, how much they feel that you care about them, and how likely it is that you will be successful. So this brings us to some of the most exhaustive research, starting with Harvard research on selling. And the basic rule is selling for the 21st century will be relationship selling. All sales are relationship sales. Whether you're selling ships or airplanes or ice cream cones, it's all relationships. So we go to page number 2, and we call this relationship selling, and here's the rule. Today, because of complex selling, relations often continue after the sale. Relationships often continue after the sale. So when you've made the sale isn't over. And this is important. It used to be if you buy a newspaper, you never have to see the person again. If you buy an article of clothing, you don't have to see them again. But if you buy more complex products, like more complex services or products or homes or technology, then you are beginning a relationship. We say we do not close sales, we open relationships, because that's when the relationship begins. As far as the customer is concerned, the sale only begins when they say yes. For many salespeople, the sale is now over when they've made the sale. As far as the customer is concerned, the selling relationship has just begun. So this brings us to number 2. The decision to enter into a sale is the decision to enter into a long-term relationship. Now there's another metaphor for a long-term relationship, and it's called a business marriage. Up to now, you've been calling on me, I've been calling on you, we've been dating. Now you're proposing marriage. Now you're proposing that I buy from you, which is the same as a marriage. It's a long-term relationship. Now, one of the most important factors that happens between dating and marriage, between visiting with the salesperson and buying, is this factor raises its ugly head. It's called dependency. Now, human beings don't like to be dependent on others. Why? It's because we have allowed ourselves to become dependent upon others in the past, and we have been hurt. And so therefore, we are very careful about becoming dependent on others. There's a concept in selling called seeding. Seeding is where you just sort of drop what we call by the ways in the course of your sales conversation. When you say, oh, by the way, people pick it up and file it away, but it's not part of your presentation. Here's one of the best by the ways. You say, oh, by the way, people say we give the very best after-sales service they've ever experienced. By the way, our customers say that they have fewer problems with this than any machine that they've ever used. By the way, people that I've dealt with say this wonderful thing about our product. We take good care of them afterwards. We're fast and responsive if they have any problems or complaints, by the way. So number 3 is the customer wants a relationship first. The customer wants a relationship first. The customer wants a relationship first. The customer wants to feel confident in you. You see, the customer doesn't know whether you use titanium welds on your motherboards. They don't know what sort of computers you use to process accounts receivable and payable. They don't know about your service people. They don't know anything about what's going on in your company, so they have to fixate on something, and usually it's you. In selling, we talk about your area of differentiation, your unique selling proposition, your area of competitive advantage. And the fact of the matter is, the one thing where you can win in any sale is yourself. It's because nobody else can be you. You are unique and special in all the world. The quality of the relationship that you can build with the prospect cannot be replaced by anybody or anything else. And top salespeople realize the most important decision will be, do they like me? And they call this liking. We talk about caring, is how much does the person like me? And they like you as a result of some of the things we'll talk about. The more I like you, the more I want to do business with you. The more I like you, the more I trust you, the more confident I am that you will take care of me. The more I like you, the more relaxed I am about going ahead. And the more I like you, the less likely it is I will buy from someone else. even if their product or service is cheaper than yours. I will pay more to buy something from someone I like than from someone that I'm questionable about. So number 4 is, as far as the customer is concerned, the relationship comes first. So here's what we have found. It's called the law of indirect effort. The law of indirect effort says this is you and this is the sale. And many people think if they just go straight for the sale, like for the jugular, they'll be successful, but often that just shows that you don't care about them, you only care about making a sale. So what you do is you do one bank in the side pocket, you focus on the relationship, and if you focus on the relationship, the sale will take care of itself. So using this law of indirect effort, this is the key to success in human relationships. The law of indirect effort is to take the time to get to know them, understand them, show that you care about them, listen to them carefully, look for ways to help them, focus on the customer before anything else, and the sale will take care of itself. So we call this the new model of selling. Okay. If I get off the chart here, you tell me. The new model of selling contrasts the old model of selling with the new model of selling. It's important to understand, there's the old model. Now, the old model was broken into 4 parts. The first part of the old model of selling, and this is the way selling was taught for several thousand years, right up until the 70s and the 80s. By the way, you know that selling is the oldest profession. Some people think that something else is the oldest profession, but that's merely a subcategory of selling. So the first 10% of the old model of selling, first 10% was developing rapport. Hello, how are you? How are the wife and kids? Get right down to the purpose of your business. Don't waste time with the customer. People are busy. That's old model selling, old school. The second part of the old model of selling, 20%, was qualifying. Find out how much money they have before you waste any time with them. Today, however, almost everybody today has access to lines of credit, so that's not even that important. Number 3, 30% of the old model of selling was presenting. And this is where you used every trick that you possibly think of to talk them out of the money that you had determined that they had in part 2. Well, the last part of the old model, 40%, was closing. And we were told buyers are liars, so close them early and often. I read a sales magazine recently, and it said the most successful formula in selling is the ABC formula, always be closing. That stuff went out decades ago. People who are writing this stuff also walk along and drag their knuckles along the ground. I mean, this is prehistoric selling. It simply doesn't work in the United States of today, and for definite reasons. Now, in the 70s and 80s, the model flipped. It flipped, and it was like an upside down, what we call the new model of selling. And it also had 4 levels. Now, the reason this happened is America experienced a perfect storm. The perfect storm was 3 things. First of all, America, after World War II, enjoyed the greatest level of affluence and rising of any country in the history of man on earth, until Reagan came in the 80s and cut the taxes, and then the economy exploded again and created another 57 million jobs. The new model has 4 parts. The first part of the new model, 40%, is building trust. Now, the fact is that trust is the critical factor in relationships. It's the critical element of all relationships, between friends and friends, between husbands and wives, between parents and children, especially between sales professionals and their clients. Trust is the element, it's the glue that holds our society together. Now, the next 30% of the new model of selling is identifying needs accurately. And the more you ask a customer or prospect about his or her needs and listen closely to the answers, the more the prospect trusts you. And the more the prospect trusts you, as you listen, the more they will tell you. And the more you ask questions and listen, the more they will tell you. And eventually the prospect will open up and tell you everything you need to know to either make a sale or to realize this is not a good prospect for what you're selling. Because they trust you so much, they will play what we call open kimono with you. They will tell you everything because they want you to have enough information to give them good advice. And they know, they trust you, they know that you won't take advantage of them. Just like a doctor. You become like a doctor of selling. Your job is to do a thorough examination before you make any attempt at a diagnosis. And the doctor, when a doctor is interviewing a patient, the patient tells the doctor everything they possibly can because they want the doctor to be able to make a good diagnosis. So these are the 2 parts. So how far into the sales conversation do you need to be before you even mention your product? 70%. And this is one of the great differences. They have videotaped over 55,000 sales calls and watched these calls, interviewed the salespeople and the customer before and after the call to find out what they were thinking. If it turned into a sale, they asked them why they bought. If it didn't turn into a sale, they asked the customer why they didn't buy. If it took several meetings before it turned into a sale, they asked what happened between the first meeting and the subsequent meetings. And they developed a very clear profile of the successful selling process. What they found is successful salespeople don't start talking about their product until they and the customer are absolutely clear that a need exists. And they only do that by questioning. But unsuccessful salespeople, let's say average salespeople, the bottom 80%, they start talking about their product from the get-go. Hi, how are you? Let me tell you what I've got. Even before they even know if this person is a prospect. So therefore, the slower you go at the beginning, and the more careful you are about clearly identifying the prospect's need, the better you are when you begin to present. Which brings us to the next 20%. And the next 20% is presenting. But in presenting, it's very simple. What you do is you simply match the customer's needs to your product or service. Very much like gears. You know, if you shift gears and the gears mesh, they're soundless. But if the gears clash, it makes a lot of noise. When you match your selling process to the customer's buying process, the meshing is perfect, like hands in a glove. So you find that you don't try to sell your product, you just show your customer that based on what he or she has said, your product or service is the ideal thing, all things considered. And here's a rule in selling. People don't argue with their own data. People don't argue with their own information. If you say it's good, that's you saying it. But if I say this is what I wanted, and you point out that your product will do that for me, how can I argue? So the best salespeople feed it back and say, based on what you said, you were concerned about this, well, our product will do that. And you wanted this, well, this product has what you wanted. And you had this problem before, well, this product is designed to avoid that problem. People don't argue with their own data. So the very best sales presentation is where you match carefully what the customer has said to what you offer. And the customer can't argue. The sale then goes together smoothly. Well, the last part, the last 10% of the new model is confirming or closing the sale. Does this make sense to you? Do you like this? Is this what you had in mind? Is this what you were looking for? Is this better than what you're doing now? The closing is very gentle and very professional if you've done the first parts properly. You don't have to use arm wrestling techniques to get the person to make a decision, because the decision is obvious because you've matched the needs so well. The sale is actually made in the presentation. The presentation is the critical part where you simply show the customer that based on what they want and need, based on their problems or situation, what you're offering is the best thing, all things considered, at this time. It may not be the best thing in the whole world, but all things considered, at this time, it's the best choice. Rule number 6 is that listening builds trust. Listening builds trust. Now, if you only remember one thing from today, remember this rule, because this rule will make you popular, it'll make you happy, it'll make you successful, and it'll ultimately make you rich. Leaders, in one of the best management studies done out of Harvard recently, they say leaders are excellent listeners. Leaders are not people who talk and give orders and tell this. Leaders go around and ask a lot of questions. And as a result, they get a lot of very good information and a good understanding of the decisions that need to be made. Leaders are great listeners. Top salespeople are superb listeners. So listening builds trust. So one-to-one relationship between asking questions and getting a chance to listen and building trust, and trust is what leads to the sale. So we say here that, listening skills are the keys to sales success. Listening skills are the keys to sales success. And there's 4 basic listening skills. If you have read all the articles and taken all the courses and listened to all the audios and watched all the videos, there's 4 keys to listening. If you read all the articles in Cosmopolitan and Vogue and People and all that, and all the questionnaires and everything else, and all the articles telling what he wants, what she wants, and so on, it comes down to 4 basic listening skills. The first listening skill is listen attentively. Listen attentively. Listen without interruptions. Listen very closely. What we have found, there's an interesting book, sold 1 million copies, called His Needs, Her Needs. And it's about the needs between men and women. And what are the primary needs that men and women have? Well, the primary need that a woman has is to be paid attention to. She wants affection, but affection is expressed in paying attention. The flip side is that there's nothing that makes a woman angrier or more frustrated than to be ignored. And so in dealing with members of the opposite persuasion, the very best thing you can do is express affection and listen attentively. In dealing with customers, listen attentively. Listen without interruptions. Lean forward and hang on every word with no attempt to interrupt. Imagine that your eyes are sun lamps and you want to give your customer's face a tan. And just listen attentively. Just listen attentively. Lean forward. Listen. Nod. Smile. Be what is called an active listener. Not an impassive listener, but an active listener. Not face the customer directly. If you're standing, lean forward on the balls of your feet, which moves all of your energy, your psychological energy, forward. If you're sitting, lean forward physically, like you're leaning into the person, and listen intently. What we have found is that people who are listened to intently, their blood pressure goes up, their heart rate goes up, their galvanic skin response goes up, but what is most important is their self-esteem goes up. A person who is very closely listened to by a professional like yourself likes themselves more. They feel more valuable and they feel more important. They feel respected. They feel that what they're saying is of value. And so when you hang on every word, you have what Les Giblin, a communications expert, calls, you have what is called white magic. White magic is the magic of just listening intently to another person. It's the most powerful of all sales techniques. Every year, the Purchasing Managers Association of America, for whom I've spoken, does a study, and these are people who work for Fortune 1000 companies and larger, and all they do is buy stuff. They have the purchasing agent's office downstairs. Everything the company needs worldwide is sent there, and they just meet salespeople all day long. Salespeople just line up like in a busy dentist's office. They just line up and come in and give their presentations all day long. And so at the end of every year, they ask these people, what do you like most about salespeople? What do you like least? Well, what do you think that they like most about salespeople? Is they ask really good questions and they listen closely to understand my true needs. This is what the sales managers, the most active purchasers in America, like the most about salespeople. What do you think they like the least? They just come in here and talk nonstop and try to sell me their stuff without taking any time to find out what it is I really need. And so that's what they like the most, and what they like the least is attentive listening. Now, number 2 is pause before replying, or B, I'm sorry, pause before replying. Pause before replying. Pause 3 to 5 seconds. Now, in pausing, you have 3 advantages. Very often, you've been in a conversation where a person says 1, 2, 3, the other person says 4, 6, A, B, C, D, F, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Is the person listening if they respond immediately? But if you say something, or the customer says something, and you pause, and you reflect on it, and you think about it, before you respond, you're telling the customer 3 things. First of all, what you're saying is really important, so I have to think about it before I answer, which compliments the prospect, raises their self-esteem, and it builds your credibility. The second thing is you avoid the risk of interrupting the prospect if he's just reorganizing his thoughts. But third of all, and this is very important for the rest of your life, if you pause, the words of the prospect actually soak in and you understand what he or she has just said at a deeper level of mind. You actually understand them better because you have let the words soak in. Whereas if you respond immediately, the words don't get a chance to soak in. So when somebody says something, pause. Say at home, if your spouse says something to you, pause, and just in that few seconds of pausing, you'll actually hear what they said. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? It's very powerful. So pausing has all benefits and no detriments. Number C is question for clarification. Question for clarification. And here is the basic rule, is the person who asks questions has control. The person who asks questions has control. And the very best question you could ask in selling is this. It is, how do you mean? How do you mean? A friend of mine was selling our seminar in New York recently, and he was talking to a prospective customer, and the fellow said, well, what have you learned from Brian Tracy's programs that's worthwhile applying? He said, how do you mean? He said, well, I mean, why would somebody go to a Brian Tracy program? He said, how do you mean exactly? And he just said, how do you mean? And he said, well, how do you mean? And he just said this several times. And he said, I'm not answering. He said, yes, I am. I am answering you. I learned the question, how do you mean? How do you mean is the most powerful questions of all, because the person who asks, how do you mean, first of all, the person being asked will expand on their previous answer. I can't afford it. Well, how do you mean? Well, we just exhausted all of our funds. Well, how do you mean exactly? Well, we won't have the funds until the next quarter. Aha. So if we could put the billing into the next quarter, then we could make it work. Well, yes, absolutely. I hadn't thought about that. Each time you ask, how do you mean, you get deeper and deeper into the answer. Also, when you ask the question, how do you mean, and listen intently, you get a chance to build trust, because the person who asks questions builds trust. So asking, how do you mean, it also enables you to take control of the sales conversation. D is feed it back, paraphrase it in your own words. This is called the acid test of listening. This is where you prove that you really were listening. This is where you prove that you weren't like one of those little dogs on the back of a car. You feed it back in your own words. So let me understand what you're saying. What you're concerned about is this, and what you want to accomplish is that, but what you had last time was this, and what you want next time is that. In other words, you feed back what they've said until they say, yes, that's it. That's my situation. When you do that, your credibility goes straight through the roof. It means that you were genuinely listening, you genuinely care, and you are genuinely trustworthy. So only then do you say, well, I think what we have is exactly the right thing for you, or I think we have something for you that will exactly be the right thing. But you only begin selling when you fed back what they have said accurately in your own words. And finally, number 8, we say that the key differentiator in selling, I mentioned this before, is the quality of the trust bond between you and the prospect. The quality of the trust bond is how high is the trust bond between you and the prospect. The rule is that if a customer really, really likes you, the details will not get in the way of buying from you. If the customer is not sure, if the credibility is at issue, the details will trip you up every step of the way. They'll argue over the details, and they'll argue over the price, and they'll argue over the differences between you and your competition. But if they like you, they'll find a reason to buy from you. So the trust bond is the critical factor. And the rule is that listening builds trust.